My name is Derek, and what happened to me on Halloween night in 2019 still makes me check my locks 3 times before bed. I was 23 years old, living alone in a small apartment in rural Pennsylvania. Halloween had always been my favorite holiday, until that night. Until I learned that some masks aren't meant to hide your identity. They're meant to hide what you've become. It was October 31st, and I decided to stay in. My apartment was on the 2nd floor of an old converted farmhouse, surrounded by cornfields that stretched for miles. The nearest neighbor was about half a mile down the road. I remember thinking it was the perfect place for some peace and quiet. I was wrong. Around 8 p.m., I was watching horror movies with the lights off, really getting into the Halloween spirit. The only light came from my TV and a jack-o'-lantern I had carved earlier that week, flickering on my coffee table. I turned off my porch light. I wasn't expecting trick-or-treaters out here in the middle of nowhere. That's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my door. I paused my movie. The knocking came again. Same rhythm, same force. I figured maybe some determined kids had made the trek out here after all. I grabbed my bowl of candy, still full, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw someone standing there. They were wearing a pumpkin mask. Not a store-bought one, but something homemade, carved from what looked like actual dried pumpkin rind, with jagged eye holes and a twisted, screaming mouth. "Hey, sorry man, I'm not doing candy this year," I called through the door. No response. The figure just stood there, perfectly still. I waited for them to leave. They didn't move, not even a little. It was like looking at a photograph. My heart started beating faster. Something felt deeply wrong. "You need to leave," I said, louder this time. Still nothing. But then, slowly, the head tilted to the side, like a curious dog examining something strange. I backed away from the door, my mouth going dry. Then the knocking started again. But this time it was different. Faster. Harder. Knock, 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 knock. Like someone desperately trying to break through. I grabbed my phone and called 911, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold it. While I was talking to the dispatcher, the knocking suddenly stopped. Complete silence. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line, that a deputy was about 15 minutes away. I crept back to the peephole, my heart hammering in my chest. The porch was empty. Relief flooded through me for exactly 3 seconds. Then I heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from my bedroom window. My blood turned to ice. I lived on the 2nd floor. There was no balcony, no fire escape, nothing. I slowly walked toward my bedroom, phone pressed to my ear, the dispatcher asking if I was okay. I could barely breathe as I reached the doorway and looked in. The window was open. The curtains were billowing in the October wind. And there, sitting on my bed, illuminated by the moonlight, was the pumpkin mask. Just a mask, placed carefully on my pillow, facing the door. Facing me. I ran. I didn't care about anything else. I just ran out of that apartment and down the stairs, bursting out into the parking lot. The deputy arrived minutes later, and we searched the entire building. Every room, every closet, nothing. But in my bedroom, they found something that still haunts me. Scratched into the wall above my bed, in letters maybe 2 inches tall, was a message. I tried to knock first. The deputy went pale. He told me something I'll never forget. 3 years earlier, a man had died in that apartment. Heart attack. He'd been there for 2 weeks before anyone found him. It was October. He'd been preparing for Halloween, carving pumpkins at his kitchen table. His name was Derek. I moved out the next day. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. And I wonder, what would have happened if I'd opened that door? My name is Sarah, and I need to tell you what happened to my daughter on Halloween 2021. Because if I don't, another parent might make the same mistake I did. Everyone warns their kids about tampered candy, needles and chocolate bars, poison and lollipops. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes the danger doesn't come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from something that should never have existed in the first place. My daughter Emma was 8 years old. Sweet kid, loved Halloween more than Christmas. That year, she dressed up as a witch, full costume, pointed hat, even a little plastic cauldron for collecting candy. We lived in a nice suburban neighborhood in Ohio. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where you leave your doors unlocked and kids play in the streets until dark. We'd done the Halloween route dozens of times. I knew every house we'd visit, but that year, there was a new house on the block, end of Maple Street, where the old Garrison place used to be. It had been abandoned for years, but someone had finally bought it and fixed it up. I'd never met the new owners. They kept to themselves, but their house was decorated beautifully for Halloween. Fake cobwebs, orange lights, a fog machine on the porch. Emma was so excited when we approached. "Look, Mom, that one's going all out." I should have trusted my instincts. Even as we walked up those steps, something felt off. The decorations looked too real. The cobwebs felt sticky, organic. And the fog, it smelled wrong, like decay and copper. Emma rang the doorbell. We heard movement inside, slow, shuffling footsteps. Then the door opened. The woman who answered was elderly, maybe 75, with white hair and a warm smile. She wore a cardigan and held a bowl filled with wrapped candies. "Oh, what a beautiful little witch," she said, her voice kind and grandmotherly. "I have something special for you, dear." She reached into her bowl and pulled out a piece of candy I'd never seen before. It was wrapped in orange wax paper, no brand label, nothing. Hand-wrapped. "I made these myself," she said, pressing it into Emma's hand. "Old family recipe. You'll love it." I should have said no. I should have grabbed Emma and left. But the woman seemed so sweet, so harmless, and Emma's eyes were shining with excitement. "What do you say, Emma?" I prompted. "Thank you." Emma chirped, dropping it into her cauldron. We got home around 9 p.m., and Emma dumped her candy on the living room floor to sort through it. That's when I saw the hand-wrapped one again. It sat apart from the others, somehow drawing the eye. "Can I try this one, Mom?" Emma asked, reaching for it. "Let me check it first," I said, taking it from her. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was what looked like a piece of toffee, dark amber, almost black, with a strange iridescence to it. I sniffed it. It smelled sweet. Too sweet. Like rotting flowers. "I don't think so, honey. This one looks old," I said, wrapping it back up. Emma went to bed disappointed, and I threw the candy in the kitchen trash. Then I went to bed myself, trying to shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. At 3:47 a.m., I woke up to screaming. I ran to Emma's room. She was sitting up in bed, sobbing, pointing at her window. Mom, there's a lady outside. She wants her candy back." I looked at the window. Second floor, no balcony, and my heart stopped. There was a handprint on the glass. On the outside, a wrinkled, elderly handprint pressed against the window like someone was standing there, 20 feet off the ground. The next morning, I called the police. They checked the house at the end of Maple Street. It was abandoned, had been for 15 years. The realtor confirmed no one had bought it. No one had been living there. The for sale sign was still in the yard, covered in years of grime and cobwebs. Real cobwebs. But here's what made my blood run cold. The detective pulled me aside and showed me a photo on his phone. It was from the case file of the original owner, Mrs. Dorothy Garrison, who died in that house in 2009. It was the same woman who'd answered the door. The detective told me something else. Every Halloween, they get calls about that house. Kids who swear someone's home. Lights on inside. Candy being given out. But every time they check, it's empty. Locked. No one's been inside for years. I still have the candy. I locked it in a safe in our basement. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear something scratching inside. Scratching, like it's trying to get out. My name is Marcus. and I want to tell you about the Halloween party I should never have attended. The one that took place in 2018. The one where not everyone made it out. You ever get an invitation to something and feel like you're supposed to go? Like it was meant for you specifically? That's how I felt when I found the envelope. Problem is, I never figured out who sent it. Not until it was too late. I was 19, freshman year of college in upstate New York. Halloween fell on a Wednesday that year, and everyone was talking about parties. But I wasn't really the party type. I was more of a keep-to-myself kind of guy. October 30th, I found an envelope slipped under my dorm room door. Black envelope, sealed with red wax. My name was written on the front in elegant calligraphy, Marcus Chun. Inside was an invitation on thick, expensive paper. You are cordially invited to the annual Halloween masquerade. October 31st, midnight. The Blackwood Estate, 1847, Hollow Road. Costume and mask required. Come alone. There was no RSVP info. No phone number. No name of who was hosting. I asked my roommate about it. He had no idea. Asked around campus. No one had heard of any Blackwood Estate. But here's the thing. I felt compelled to go. It's hard to explain. It was like the invitation was pulling me, calling to me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I decided to go. Halloween night, I dressed up in a simple vampire costume I'd thrown together and put on a half mask I'd bought at a drugstore. At 11:30 p.m., I drove out to Hollow Road. The Blackwood Estate wasn't on any GPS, but I found it anyway. Like I knew exactly where to go. It was a massive Victorian mansion at the end of a long dirt driveway, surrounded by dead trees. Every window glowed with orange light, and I could hear music drifting through the air. Old music, like 1920s jazz. Cars lined the driveway, expensive ones. Mercedes, BMWs, even a Rolls-Royce. I parked and walked to the front door, my breath fogging in the cold October air. The door was open. I stepped inside. The place was packed with people in elaborate costumes and masks. Victorian gowns, plague doctor outfits, animal masks. Everyone was dancing, drinking, laughing. The music was live. A full jazz band in the corner, though I couldn't see their faces beneath their skeletal masks. A woman in a red dress and a fox mask approached me, holding a glass of dark liquid. "You're late," she whispered, her voice like silk. "But you're here now. That's what matters." She pressed the glass into my hand and vanished into the crowd. I took a sip. It was wine, I think, but it tasted strange. Metallic, sweet and bitter at once. Around 1 a.m., the music stopped. Everyone froze mid-dance, mid-conversation, like someone had pressed pause on the whole room. Then a man walked down the grand staircase. He wore a black suit and a skull mask that looked too real, like actual bone. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "It's time for the revelation." Everyone began removing their masks. I watched in growing horror as the people around me took off their masks, and underneath, their faces were wrong, melted, rotted. Some had no faces at all, just smooth skin where eyes and mouth should be. The woman in the red fox mask stood beside me. She removed her mask. Underneath was a face I recognized. A face I'd seen in a photograph from my sociology textbook. Amelia Blackwood, dead since 1924. She smiled at me, her teeth black and rotting. "You're the last one we needed, Marcus. The final guest. You see, every 13 years, we need a new member. Someone living. Someone to take the place of the one who served their time." I tried to run. The doors had disappeared. The windows showed only black void. "You accepted the invitation," she whispered. "You came alone. You drank the wine. You're ours now." I woke up the next morning in my dorm room, sunlight streaming through the window. I thought it was a nightmare, some kind of terrible dream brought on by stress and too much Halloween candy. But my vampire costume was covered in dirt and leaves. My shoes were caked in mud, and on my nightstand was a black envelope. Inside was a single card. Thank you for attending. You are now a member of the Blackwood estate. We will see you again in 13 years. Do not try to avoid the next invitation. They never work. That was 7 years ago. I have 6 years left, and I've already started seeing the signs. Black envelopes in my mailbox with no postage. My reflection in mirrors wearing masks I'm not wearing. Whispers in empty rooms counting down. If you ever find a black envelope with your name in calligraphy, don't open it. Burn it. Throw it away. Run. Because once you read that invitation, you're already halfway there. My name is Olivia, and when I was 12 years old, I knocked on a door I should have walked past. A door that opened to something that wasn't supposed to exist. They tell you to stick to well-lit houses on Halloween. Houses with decorations. Houses with porch lights on. But they don't tell you what to do when a house you've never seen before suddenly appears on your street, and you feel like you have to go inside. It was Halloween 2015, and I was trick-or-treating with my two best friends, Kayla and Brandon. We were in my neighborhood in suburban Massachusetts, a place I'd lived my entire life. I knew every house, every yard, every shortcut. We were about to call it a night when Brandon pointed down the street. "Hey, what about that one?" I looked where he was pointing. At the end of the cul-de-sac was a house I'd never seen before. Victorian style, 3 stories, painted deep purple with black trim. Every window glowed with warm orange light, and the lawn was covered in elaborate Halloween decorations, animatronic ghosts, a graveyard, fog rolling across the grass. "That house wasn't there yesterday," I said slowly. Kayla laughed. "You're crazy." Of course it was. "Come on, it looks awesome." But I was right. I knew I was right. The house had never been there before. Still, we walked toward it. With every step, my stomach felt heavier. The air got colder. By the time we reached the porch, I could see my breath fogging in the air, even though it was a mild October night. The front door was open. Not wide open, but cracked just enough to see inside. A long hallway lit by candles, hardwood floors, old-fashioned wallpaper. "Hello," Brandon called out. "Trick or treat." Footsteps echoed from inside. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. A man appeared in the doorway. He was tall, maybe 40s, wearing a 3-piece suit that looked 100 years old. His face was pale, his eyes dark and sunken. "Good evening, children," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "I've been expecting you." "Expecting us?" I felt Kayla grab my arm. "Would you like to come inside?" The man continued, stepping back and gesturing into the house. "I have something special for trick-or-treaters this year. Something you can't get anywhere else." Every instinct screamed at me to run, but Brandon was already walking through the door. "Brandon, wait," I started, but Kayla followed him. And then, before I could think, I was following too. Like my legs moved on their own. The inside was wrong. Not scary wrong. Just wrong. The hallway stretched impossibly long. The candles on the walls burned with flames that didn't flicker. And the wallpaper, when you looked at it directly, it showed a Victorian pattern. But in your peripheral vision, it looked like faces. Screaming faces. The man led us to what he called the treat room. It was a parlor filled with antique furniture, and in the center was a table covered with candy. But not regular candy. These were confections I'd never seen. Crystallized fruits that glowed faintly, chocolates shaped like tiny organs, lollipops with things suspended inside them that might have been insects, or might have been something worse. "Take whatever you'd like," the man said, smiling. "But remember, once you take something from this house, you belong to this house." Brandon reached for a glowing piece of candy. I grabbed his wrist. "Don't," I whispered. That's when I noticed the pictures on the walls. Old photographs in antique frames. And in every single one, there were children. Children in old-fashioned Halloween costumes, holding bags of candy, smiling at the camera. Dozens of them. "Those are my previous guests," the man said softly. "They come back to visit every Halloween." Would you like to meet them? The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. The candles went out, and in the darkness, I heard them. Children's voices, whispering, giggling, coming from the walls, from the floor, from everywhere and nowhere. I screamed. Run. We ran. Through the hallway that seemed to stretch forever, past those screaming wallpaper faces, through shadows that grabbed at our ankles. I felt cold hands brush my hair, heard whispers promising we'd be so happy here forever. We burst through the front door and didn't stop running until we were 5 blocks away. When we finally looked back, the house was gone. Just an empty lot with a for sale sign that looked like it had been there for years. The next day, I did some research. Turns out, there used to be a Victorian house on that lot. It burned down in 1952. Entire family died in the fire, parents and their 3 children. They'd been hosting a Halloween party. But here's what keeps me up at night. Last Halloween, 7 years later, I was driving through my old neighborhood, just passing through, and I saw it again. The purple Victorian house, at the end of the cul-de-sac. Lights on, decorations out, and standing on the porch, holding a bowl of candy, was the man in the suit. He waved at me. I drive a different route now. I never go back to that neighborhood, but sometimes I wonder, how many kids have knocked on that door since, and how many of them made it out? My name is Jennifer, and I'm about to tell you why my family doesn't celebrate Halloween anymore, why I burned every costume in our house, and why we moved 3 states away from where this happened. When your child starts acting different, you notice. When they start saying things they shouldn't know. When they look at you with eyes that aren't quite theirs anymore. That's when you realize something came home with them on Halloween night, and it never left. This happened 2 years ago. Halloween 2023. My son Tyler was 6 years old. Bright kid. Happy. Loved superheroes and dinosaurs and making blanket forts. He'd been excited about Halloween for weeks, and he'd chosen to be a scarecrow. I'd made the costume myself. Flannel shirt, overalls, straw hat, a little bit of raffia sticking out of the sleeves and collar. He looked adorable. We went trick-or-treating in our neighborhood just outside Portland, Oregon. My husband David took Tyler while I stayed home to hand out candy. They came back around 8:30 p.m. Tyler's pumpkin bucket filled to the brim. Did you have fun, sweetie? I asked, kissing his forehead. He nodded but didn't say anything. Just stared at me with this blank expression. David whispered that Tyler had been quiet for the last half hour of trick-or-treating. He's probably just tired, David said. That night, Tyler insisted on sleeping in his scarecrow costume. I tried to get him to change into pajamas, but he had a meltdown, screaming, crying, clawing at me when I tried to remove the straw hat. The scarecrow doesn't want to come off, he said through tears. He says he likes it here. I felt a chill run down my spine. What did you say? But Tyler just rolled over and went to sleep, still in full costume. The next morning, things got worse. Tyler came to breakfast, still wearing the costume. He sat at the table, staring straight ahead, not blinking. I put a bowl of cereal in front of him. He didn't move. Tyler, aren't you hungry? The scarecrow isn't hungry, he said in a flat, emotionless voice. The scarecrow just watches. David and I exchanged looks. Tyler, buddy, Halloween's over, David said gently. Let's take off the costume now, okay? Tyler's head snapped toward David with unnatural speed. No, the costume stays on. The scarecrow stays inside. Inside, not on. Inside. I reached for his arm to pull him up from the chair. The moment I touched him, I jerked back. The raffia sticking out of his sleeves. It was moving, slowly wriggling, like worms. David, I whispered, my voice shaking. Look at the straw. We both watched in horror as the pieces of raffia began to pulse, to writhe, working their way deeper into the fabric of the costume. And then we realized they weren't going into the costume. They were going into Tyler's skin, We rushed him to the emergency room. The doctors cut the costume off while Tyler screamed, not crying, but making sounds that didn't seem human. Animal shrieks mixed with words in a language I didn't recognize. When they finally got the costume off, we saw what was underneath. Tyler's skin was covered in thin scratches arranged in patterns, symbols, and embedded in his arms, his chest, his back were pieces of straw, real straw, growing out of his skin like hair. The doctors had no explanation. They pulled out what they could with tweezers, but more kept appearing. Tyler was sedated, and they kept him for observation. That night, while David and I sat in the hospital room watching Tyler sleep, I heard something, a rustling sound. I looked toward the corner where they'd thrown the scarecrow costume into a biohazard bag. The bag was moving. I walked over slowly, my heart pounding. Through the clear plastic, I could see the costume, repositioning itself. The arms moving, the straw hat tilting up. And then I saw it. There was a face in the costume. Not Tyler's face. Not a human face. Something made of straw and shadow and hunger, staring at me through the plastic. A mouth opened in a mass of straw, and a voice like wine through dead fields whispered, "Give me back the boy." He invited me in. He's mine now. I screamed for David. We called for security, for doctors, for anyone. By the time they arrived, the costume was just a costume again. Lifeless. Empty. But Tyler woke up, and when he opened his eyes, they were wrong. The irises were too light, almost yellow, like dried core husks. "Mom," he said, but it didn't sound like Tyler. It sounded like something imitating Tyler. A psychiatrist evaluated him. They said he was probably just traumatized, experiencing some kind of dissociative episode. They sent us home with medication and a referral to a child psychologist. That was 2 years ago. Tyler seems normal now. Mostly. He plays with friends, does well in school, laughs at cartoons, but he won't go near scarecrows. If he sees one, he freezes, and his eyes go distant. And sometimes, late at night, I hear him in his room, talking to someone. When I ask who he's talking to, he says, "The scarecrow. He lives inside me now. He's waiting." Last week, I found something that made me call a priest. I was cleaning Tyler's room and found a drawing he'd made. It showed our family, me, David, Tyler, and his little sister Emma. But in the drawing, Tyler was wearing a scarecrow costume. And behind Emma, there was another scarecrow, waiting. Emma's Halloween costume this year? She wants to be a scarecrow. We're moving again. Somewhere they don't celebrate Halloween. Somewhere without cornfields or pumpkin patches. But I know it won't matter. Because whatever came home with Tyler that night, it's patient. It's growing. And it's hungry for more. If your child ever insists on keeping their Halloween costume on, don't let them. Burn it. Destroy it. Because some costumes aren't meant to be worn. They're meant to be inhabited. And once they're inside, they never truly leave.